which means I'm opening the episode in a cold manner, which I have yet to work out how exactly to do smoothly.
Cool.
Leo is in the background, everyone. Hello, everyone. Evening all. It's Rail Natter. Leo is in the green room. Actually, he's not. He's waiting in the wings for me to bring us in, because tonight, it's episode 186, putting geofencing to good use to improve track safety. We have the founder of Tended, Leo Scott Smith, joining us tonight, which is very exciting, to talk about a very useful application of geofencing technology to improve safety. It's good stuff. We are safety is still a problem on our railways. We had a really uncomfortable spate of track worker fatalities in the last sort of over the last 5 years. We had a bit of a surge, having done quite a good job of not killing any track workers. We had a surge of them, and it spurred a load of safety initiatives, and opened the door to some interesting innovations, which we will talk more about shortly, because Leo and I are going to go through the whole story. This is a short cold open because I always make it long, far too long. Everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the Intercity 225 fades away, the first thing I need to do, well, actually, it's the news first, because rather excitingly, this is hot off the press because it happened early, well, at the end of last week. Tended wins highly commended. Wins. You have been highly commended at the Railway Oscars, the National Rail Awards. Here's Steph McGovern introducing you guys with a load of important people at the front. In fact, you can see. If I get my Wacom out, wait a minute, I can point out. Leo, you'll like this. So here's the Rail Minister, here is Lord Hendy, and somewhere behind here is also Haynes. In fact, I think this is Andrew Haynes' shoulder. All looking excitedly at... actually, no, I think that might be Haynes over here with his glasses. In any case, all enjoying a good show and seeing the Tended logo massive in the Grosvenor Hotel. Anyway, this is very good. Congratulations, Leo, as a way to introduce you to the show. Well done for this. It's very good.
Much. Thanks, Gareth.
Were any of you in attendance? Did you manage to get a few people down?
I unfortunately wasn't, but some of our team was.
Nice.
Yeah, I can't even remember where I was. I think I might have actually even been trackside at the time.
Really? Okay.
Yes, yeah. So our team got to go and enjoy the awards and the lovely food, but no, I wasn't there, unfortunately.
Nice, which gives me a chance to actually bring you in and say, before we get on with the episode, is to say, Leo, thanks so much for joining us. Founder of Tended, Leo Scott Smith joins us. So that's an interesting point, actually. Firstly, I'll let you introduce yourself, maybe briefly sort of say kind of what you do, what your background is, and how you created what is now a railway technology company, or at least partly a railway technology company.
Yeah, of course. Thanks. So, Leo Scott Smith, I'm the founder and CEO at Tended, and Tended is a 6-year-old organisation that I found with really kind of the focus of building really cool technology that will one day be able to save somebody's life, and that's been our kind of core focus. My background before that was actually working in the charity and non-profit sector, so this kind of really led on to this view of actually I was helping people in other countries, and then I realised the importance of duty of care, and I came in and said, actually, let's do something really cool with technology and let's see how that applies. And Network Rail have been one of our key customers, and somebody that's adopted our technologies kind of quite heavily.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit later on when we talk about the development cycle. We'll talk about how, I suppose there's some, I mean, fortuitous is the wrong word because it was off the back of fatalities, but there was some timing that slotted in with Network Rail needing to do something different about safety, needing to talk about massive cultural change to try and get those last fatalities off the board, timing with what you created. So we'll talk about that later anyway. But so you're on track. How often do you get out on track? Is that partly trialing or just seeing the kit in action, or is it what gets you out there, or is it you can't tell us? You'd have to kill us.
No, I can happily tell you. I believe that my job isn't just spent behind a computer screen and telling people what to do. The most important and valuable thing that we can do across the whole board for all of our team is really trying to spend as much time with our users as possible, because it's all good and well building a great bit of technology, but if we don't actually know how that's going to apply to our users and the benefits and the value it's going to bring to them, how can we build a successful product? So I try to get out on track as much as possible. It can be anywhere from once a week if we're really busy, up to at least twice every week. I must say, I've not got my PTS quite yet. I'm just relying on TPP. I'm just about to, I think it's 2 weeks from now, run through my PTS. So fingers crossed for that.
You'll be doing better than me, because although maybe it'll change when I join my new company, but my previous company stopped. They said stop doing PTS, just use TVPs if you're not getting out on site frequently enough. And to be fair, as I've got more senior, I've been out less. So you'll be doing better than me if you get your PTS. You'll be on a nice white hat. I've got a very shiny blue hat that obviously is to my eternal shame. Talking of the people out on site, because that's really what it's all about, and that's kind of the story of this, is that there is no avoiding the fact that the railway, this is what I love about the railway, is this connection it has to the past. You still need people to be out on track. There are loads of things we can do to reduce, particularly for things like inspection and maintenance, there are loads of things we can do to reduce boots on ballast, but ultimately you still need people out on track, whether it's me going out and doing a survey to do some design, whether it's specific maintenance, care, asset renewal, whatever it happens to be. People need to be out on track. That is never going to go away, and so those people are exposed somewhat. In fact, this video, which I'm about to play, which is going to come up quite a lot more loudly than I expected it to. So, in fact, I'm going to. That's fine. I shall fix it in post. There is a classic. There is, in fact, no, I have mixers. I'm going to reduce the volume of this. Right. The thing is, when you're in a train, things move very quickly. So whilst you're stood on track, you cannot basically. I've stood next to the track when a train is coming along at 125 miles an hour, and you basically can't hear it until it's on top of you. Like you'll know this yourself, having been out on track and presumably stood next to trains passing, potentially stepping off while there's, if you're working site warden, if there's a line block, whatever it is. The trains, you basically don't hear them until they're on top of you, right? Particularly if there isn't a horn going off. So an idea of that, this is it's 125 mile an hour inside a train cab, and things pass pretty quickly. So there's a level crossing coming up, and you're onto it in a few seconds. The train, things move. Actually, it's funny. In the cab, it doesn't feel quite as fast, but actually, this thing is 125 miles an hour. It's on you in seconds. So briefly, and apologies to Leo, who's in fact this is revision for your PTS training. If you're about to take your PTS, this is revision for it.
It's certainly.
So the current protection arrangements for track staff, for on-track staff. Here is a nice bit of track south of York, because that was the nearest thing I could find on Visivy that was easy. So we have some tracks, and the rule book and the standard RT 170, which is basically this document. In fact, I've got one behind me here. Where is it? Here it is, my guide to personal track safety. I've got a bit of an old one. This is the one I got when I did my PTS years ago, but it's still basically the same. It could probably do with updating to include stuff about geofencing. Anyway, I digress. That document says what protection arrangements are. So the best way to work is what's called safeguarded, which is where the whole railway, boundary to boundary, is, or at least sort of with a wide area of protection, is closed. There are no trains anywhere near you, and you can work fairly comfortable, fairly safely. I mean, there's still all the standard hazards of slips, trips, falls, live stuff, so on and so forth. But you can, and also on-track machines and things can move around within a safeguarded environment. But you don't have trains coming through at 125 miles an hour. Fenced is then the next form of protection. So you have a physical barrier protecting the open railway from the closed railway, from the area you can work. So the green area there is the area where you can work, and fenced off, you can have trains going up to 125 miles an hour in the red bit. That's reasonable protection because there's a physical barrier. So this comes back to what we're going to talk about is some of the psychology, the behavioral side of things, right, Leo? This is absolutely where your technology steps in, is getting in between that behavioral, the what's going on in your head to then what your physical behaviors are. The advantage of a physical fence, obviously, there's a physical fence there. You in theory cannot pass it. Then you step down into a very common form of protection. I've worked a lot under this form of protection, site warden warning. So the lines you're working on are closed, but you are working next to, without any physical barrier, you are working next to lines that could be open at 125 miles an hour. This requires a person called a site warden, and they have to either by touch or by noise stop you from stepping beyond the rail kind of the track that is open, so that you don't go into the 6 foot of the open tracks, so that you're clear and safe of passing trains. This is okay, so this is safer than having trains passing on the tracks you're working on, but you can see why this is, everyone watching, you can see why this is less safe. And again, this is where Leo comes in, but we'll talk about that momentarily. The next forms of operation are quite a bit less safe again. There's two really. There's equipment warning, which is where you have equipment that is either permanently mounted trackside, or you have equipment attached to, there might be a kind of temporary equipment that you can kind of carry along, you clip it onto the tracks and so on. So things like train operated warning system, TOWS is kind of the common one, and it's kind of fitted all over the place. The step down from that is lookout warning using either a electronic protection system, or worse, the old flags. It's the old bloke with some flags, which is hopeless, absolutely hopeless and outdated form of staff protection. And until very recently, we were still doing an awful lot of work under that form of what we call red zone protection. Not good. And indeed, we're at the point now. So this is some of the recent history of what's happened is as a result of several fatal track worker collisions happening under lookout protection. And there's a whole... Nick Millington is the chap who was president of PWI, among other things. He was in charge of the safety task force to basically respond to this, to these incidents, right? And Leo, I suppose that... I presume you've had chats with... In fact, I know you've had chats with Leo, because with Nick, because he has championed some of the... He has certainly championed your technology, the idea of geofencing as a way to kind of improve safety and encourage staff to not fall back and rely on... So this, we'll come to this, I'm sure, but one of the challenges, I suppose, with using Lookout is that in theory it's easy. You don't have to worry about signaler capacity. You don't have to worry about the availability of possessions or blockades that you can piggyback on. You don't have to go out and put fences up. So it feels easy. So the advantage of your technology, as we'll get to, is that it gets rid of some of that feeling of, it's difficult to... We just want to go out and do a quick thing. More on that later. But we have to talk about what the hell geofencing is. Leo, I suppose this really is your patch, but I suppose I'll start by saying that people, anyone who's ridden one of these tier scooters or any of the hire bikes or scooters within London that exist will have encountered geofencing, right? I'd say is this possibly the most widespread use of the technology at the moment in the UK? Certainly,
I think I would say that it's probably. There's some others that most people use more on a daily basis. So Deliveroo and Uber
yes,
Eats.
Okay, yeah.
Hopefully people aren't using those on a daily basis. But any kind of form of mapping system probably has geofencing in it. So it could be Google Maps. It could be, as you've got an example there, your tier mobility scooters. Anything that needs to know where you are and give you some kind of trigger, whether it be an alert or a warning once you are entering into that zone. So, you've got your speed on your sat nav, or that will show you that where you're getting into a certain speed zone. That'll be using some form of geofencing. Yes,
which more on that later, because as soon as I become the Secretary of State for Transport, I'll be mandating geofencing on all new vehicles. All new cars that just require a basic driver's license will require geofencing. Anyway, so it looks like this on your phone. The geofencing, you can see the area where you're allowed to. In the big red patches, there are areas where you can't ride the tier scooter, so it stops the scooter from working in areas that are pedestrianised or whatever it is. And so, for example, you could do this with cars, for example, by, introducing a 10 mile an hour speed limit within the inner ring road. That'd be useful. Anyway, I digress. This is the bit where you got involved, right, Leo? So talk about, we're going to talk about the history of Tended, but the technology you got, what does it do? So if you have site warning, what does the technology do to this form of protection?
Yeah, of course. So in the simplest form, it is a it's a virtual fence. So what will happen is that you will then create a virtual fence which will be mapped out based upon lines that you are safe to work on. And then if an individual strays over one of those boundaries of that virtual fence, which could potentially mean that they're straying onto a live line, it will give them a warning the second that they stray over that boundary. And the kind of really unique part of this technology is that it's the accuracy of the positioning. So when we were talking earlier about the Tier mobility scooters and your smartphone GPS, your standard GPS in your smartphone is generally between 2 to 10 meters in accuracy. Yeah. Now, as you can imagine, with railway tracks being 6 foot apart, you're not going to be in a position where a 2 to 10 meter accuracy is going to be sustainable, because it may show that you are in a position of safety when actually you're not at all. You're working on a line where there's a 125-mile-an-hour train. So our technology uses the same technology that you'll find in autonomous vehicles, drones, surveying equipment like the Trimble kits that I'm sure you go out with, Gareth, doing different surveys on track. And we've condensed that down into something that's small enough and low enough power that we're able to use it as a mobile device to alert individuals the second they stray out of a position of safety.
Yeah, so as you say, we talked about what the physical fence looks like. You're creating a virtual fence. So you're creating that virtual fence, and it doesn't mean that you can call I believe the certificate, your PADS approval certificate. It's not that you're allowed to call it a fence site, but you're essentially providing the additional. That kind of the additional virtual barrier to provide that extra bit of safety. And we were talking before the episode about distractions and about daydream states. I think talk briefly about that the sort of the psychology that you're tapping into a bit here.
Yeah, no, of course. So I mean, one of the very interesting parts about Tended, and I will kind of jump back to our history a little bit. Which is that we've spent the past 6 years building safety critical wearables for traditional industries. And this isn't just the rail industry, it's construction, it's manufacturing, it's logistics. And what you often see is that it's quite hard to get engagement of these new technologies. So about 2.5 years ago, I put a job advert out that basically just said, I don't know why I need you, but I know I need somebody that understands human brains. And it was for a behavioural scientist. And we ended up hiring Jules, who used to be a behavioural safety specialist at HS2 and Balfour Beatty. And she's kind of added this really interesting part to our business, where we don't just look at building really cool technology to help improve safety, but we also look at the human factors and the behavioural psychology behind it that leads to these kind of losses of situational awareness. So there's kind of 3 really important points to factor in when you're considering trackside work. The first is around an alpha state. So generally, for every hour, you're going to be in a position where there's going to be 10 minutes of daydreaming, and it's just something that the human body does. So for the people that are watching this show today, I'm sure Gareth will hate to hear this, but for 10 minutes of you watching this, you're probably going to be daydreaming.
Oh, and more. More, I'd imagine, for people watching.
They're going to be looking at their phone, they're going to be reading emails, whatever it might be. But then you kind of amplify that to people working nights, which obviously we're moving towards as we remove like red zone working, which we talked about earlier, so we don't impact kind of the delay minutes for passengers. You end up in this position where actually that daydreaming or that alpha state ends up building and being even more. So you could be in a position where over a 5-hour shift, you could have somebody that's distracted for an hour and a half. So when you've got your site wardens or your lookouts that are basically ensuring that people are safe and they're staying in a safe position, they're in a position where they may also be daydreaming, or they might be getting down in the digs and doing a little bit of actual on the ground work. And what that means is that they can't keep an eye on all of their team. And if one of their team strays or whatever it may be, they could then be in a position of unsafety. And you've got a couple of others as well, like cultural norms. Everybody likes to follow the one with the loudest voice. So what that means is that if you've got one really loud voice in that team and they're going, oh no, it's fine, just cross over that line. We do it all the time. Actually, that could then be putting everybody else in risk because one person's got a louder voice than everybody else. And then the final one is availability heuristics, and that basically looks at the idea of if somebody has experienced one thing many times over, they're going to kind of get into their comfort zone. So if you've got track workers that for 20 years have never had an incident and they've never seen anybody be hit by a train, then they're going to think that their job is safe. But actually, if you've got a track worker that unfortunately has seen one of these near misses, or they've even worse seen a fatality, they'll probably be extra safe. But fortunately for us, not many people have been in that scenario, but unfortunately for us, it means that lots of people just think that everything that they do on their daily basis is safe, but actually that's really not the case, as we've seen and we've discussed through this conversation.
Yeah, and so it's provide that the ability to create that fence is obviously hugely valuable. It's tapping into that psychology to improve safety, to kind of get around some of the things, the natural things that we all do, the daydreaming, that distraction, that loss of attention, the falling into patterns of behavior. Very useful. So yeah, you get a physical fence is great, but you can't put them everywhere. Clapham Junction here, if you've got a particular area that requires working, it's very difficult to create a fenced work site through there, whether because it takes a million line blocks to actually get to the place you need to be to put the fence up in the first place, or whether there's just track in the way. You can't actually put the fencing up and because there's so much S&C everywhere. So suddenly in a complex area like this, actually the geofencing comes into its own as being really specific, really useful for creating specific work sites. Very, 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 very useful. I think there's about to be a video which we can watch, which I think you created for Network Rail, or Network Rail have created it with you.
What is geofencing technology, and how can it help improve the safety of our track workers? For us, a geofence can provide a virtual barrier around planned safe working limits. The technology detects when someone steps outside of the virtual barrier and alerts the wearer, providing an additional tap on the shoulder if they lose situational awareness. It comprises of two components: a simple dashboard used to set up a geofence zone around planned safe working limits, and a device worn by each worker. The device recognizes the precise location of the barrier so that each worker can be alerted if they stray too close to the edge of the safe working limits. The geofence barrier is set up during the planning process when agreeing the safe working limits. Network Rail's geospatial data provides precise locations for this step, which is carried out in advance of workers being deployed on track. On site, the safe system of work is implemented by the COS or PIC, and the warning device is used for secondary protection, in addition to the site warden. The device is lightweight and designed so that tasks can be carried out unimpeded. It alerts the wearer through sound, light, and vibration alerts. The alert will continue while the worker is outside the virtual barrier, and they must return to the geofence safe working limits to reset the device. By harnessing the accuracy of geofencing technology, we can further improve the safety of our track workers' teams.
And there you go. Well, I think it explains it rather cleanly for anyone who hasn't quite understood what we're talking about up till now. Network Rail have loads of good explainer videos like that. Actually, for anyone who doesn't go into the Network Rail YouTube site, there's loads of videos like that. They explain all sorts of things. It's great. Here it is. We've been talking about it, and we haven't had a nice picture of it yet. Here is, and this is hot off the press, because I believe this is a slightly updated version of the kit compared to the pictures that I was sent through it. It's or certainly aesthetically slightly updated. Yeah, it's quite small. This is the key thing, I suppose. It can't be a huge Lunken great thing because everyone will hate wearing it. But it's small. I've had it on my own arm. It was pretty nifty. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it's that we've spent. We started this project initially with Network Rail, I think 3 years ago now, and one of the biggest challenges was getting it to actually be small enough. And we have just got a new model that's due to be released ready for CP7, and it's even half the size of that. And the investment that is required just to shrink something is millions of pounds.
I was going to say, miniaturizing is expensive, and it's the sort of thing where you want to get the proof of concept working before you really commit to the. Now that there's. Now that Network Rail has jumped and this is, being used, you can then make that commitment, which is a running long-term commitments. Everyone, they have useful side effects. Funny that. So here's the kit, and here's kind of again hot off the press. Megan sent these through. Shout out to Megan, by the way. Thanks for your help, Megan, and getting all these bits and pieces to us for our chat. This is the latest version of what the tablet kind of kit looks like to sort of actually set the geofence up, like to set the work site up. And you can see, I presume you just basically plot a nice little sort of polygon, and it allows you to be quite selective in where. So you could run that up the 6 foot and say, well, it's the splitting point is the 6 foot, and that and again, you talk about accuracy. Tier scooters are notoriously inaccurate to the point of irritation when you are on a big main road and it slows you down to like stop pace with big vehicles behind you. That can be frustrating. But as you say, that's 2 to 10 meters accuracy. As anyone using a GPS on their phone knows, doing anything, it's not hugely accurate. Whereas we're talking about surveying accuracies. As you say, you're tapping into that the kind of the GPS pickup to get that. Essentially, what you've done is you've miniaturized the thing that when I do surveys, the team has to sit a thing on their line side for like 48 hours to make sure they've got the correct GPS fix so that everything's accurate. How you've miniaturized that, we'll never know, because that's the USP. That's the clever bit, but it is very clever.
Yeah,
and
I mean, on the planning thing, it's fascinating, and it's also a great opportunity for us to demo it to people, because you can draw a geofence anywhere. So what we normally do is we'll draw a geofence in a car park when we can't get out on site, and we'll just draw it around a car park space, and then you'll just put the device over the edge of the line in the car park space, and then instantly that device will go off and alert that individual. And it almost is mind-boggling. And even today, after 3 years of playing about this technology, it still blows my mind at the accuracy of what you're just able to achieve. And as well as the process of drawing a geofence manually, we've very recently introduced something which makes things way easier for our users, where all you actually have to do is put in your ELR and your mileage and chain, and then it will automatically generate a geofence zone, so you don't even have to draw it.
Nice. That's very, very useful. And so that's very useful, because you can just take it straight off your safe work pack can almost include confirmation that tended has been activated for this line. That's very, very useful. And so integrating that for the planner, the site planner, to be able to actually have that process and go through that, very, very useful. Site planners do a lot of work, and the more of it can be automated, or at least easier for them, the better, because if they're having to do lots of manual repeat tasks, that's where they can make mistakes as well, and potentially entering in the wrong work site. So it's very useful to be able to improve that process as well. Here's a nice demonstrating picture. We showing. In fact, this is, anyone watching this will recognise this as decidedly European bit of railway. But you can see sort of where the process by which and the concept by which it works. And then it makes a big buzzy noise. You heard the noise in the video. It makes a buzzy noise. It vibrates, and the light flashes as well. So you can have staff, generally to be working on site, you have to have, you can't be blind or deaf, but you can, work sites are noisy. So having a flashing light and a vibration is really important, because actually that noise, it might sound loud when you're not got anything else going on, but if you've got a tamper next to you, or if you've got some other piece of stone blower going past that's incredibly loud, or someone's using the whacker plates, then actually the vibration and the flashing light, really important.
And it's also quite good, particularly when you look at it from an application of a site warden to support their existing work activities. If they've got an individual that's 200 metres away, they can then see their flashing light going off, and it means that they then know that one of their team potentially is in an unsafe position. Really built around not just supporting the individual, but also that site warden to carry out their job, more effectively.
Absolutely. And there's also some other, as ever with this technology, there are now, of course, we don't want you to be, this isn't about putting people on the naughty step because they step outside of the geofence regularly, but it allows you to look at, if there is particular, I suppose, with all the data that you get out of it, allows you to do things like analysis of fatigue and understand the health and the well-being of your workforce by actually how that work team, they did have a large number of step out incidents. Have they been working a lot? Are they actually fatigued? There's potential. There's a lot of potentially useful outputs from this. I suppose what you've been looking at. If you've got Jules on board, then I suppose Jules is quite interested in this stuff, right?
Yeah, the way we look at it is it's kind of like the Strava, but for your track workers. So we don't want to provide any kind of data that enables any tracking or any areas where it means that teams could be penalised. But what we do want to do is enable teams to have access to data that allows them to do their job better. So a really good example of one of our clients recently was that, and this was one of the principal contractors rather than Network Rail, they were having to work very closely up to the edge of a safe work boundary, so within half a metre, because of some vegetation. And they were able to go back to Network Rail and say, look, you either need to clear this vegetation so we can work here because we're having to get so close to the boundary, or you need to give us a full line block so we can work across both lines, so that we're not having to get within a half a metre. So it's actually allowing people to do their job better, but also in a good way actually make a data-driven argument to management or Network Rail to say, actually, we need better, and here's the evidence to show you.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that's important is the ability to, Network Rail, I think as an organisation, Network Rail do put their money where their mouth is in terms of safety. Certainly on a kind of, okay, there are some structural challenges and widespread challenges, and the structure of the industry sometimes doesn't favour that with contingent workforces and so on. But this provides, it's very useful to provide that data, as you say, data-driven backup to the teams to push back on a particular thing and say, no, not only are we feeling this is unsafe, and everyone is empowered to stop work. Everyone on the railway is empowered to stop work whenever they feel anything is unsafe or could potentially be unsafe. Everyone is empowered to do that. I know lots of people who work on the railways watch this. Hello, all of you. Just to restate, you have all of you have stop work authority under any circumstance, whether it's in the office, on site, in the car park before you're about to go on site. You can all stop work whenever you like, and should exercise that if ever you felt you needed to. This provides some of that data to back that up. Potentially, in retrospect, if you've just stopped an expensive work, if you've stopped an expensive activity, this provides some data to kind of back you up. Yeah, it's really good for that. So there are other things, there are other uses, and you can say to me whether you're looking at these or already doing these. In fact, I know you're already doing a couple of them. One of the things you could do is, okay, on track in terms of active trains, but in terms of active OLE, that's something else that in terms of it's not just the lines that are open in terms of the lines open from running trains, but actually it's marking out the lines that are have live OLE above them or not.
Yeah, and also ensuring that isolation straps have been, one, placed in the right location, but also two, removed at the end of a job as well. So as well as providing track workers with wearables, we can also put tags onto assets. So that could be stop boards, marker boards, it could be isolation straps, so that you know exactly where they are across a work site as well. Yeah,
that's right. So yeah, exactly. So expensive kit that can go line side, you can tag that. You can kind of tag that to make sure. I mean, for a variety of reasons. One, so you know it's in the right place. Two, so that you don't leave it there at the end of the shift, because that's a problem that happens. I suppose you could put it on scrap materials that you want to be collected to remind yourself to go and pick them up. The other thing is exclusion zones for kit. So a question I have. So you can Tended sets up the static geofence. Can you set them up to do proximity? Is that something that they're able to do? So if you had them on like a road rail vehicle, for example.
There's a very interesting point on that. It's very easy for us to do that, to create these moving exclusion zones around plant. There are some very good technology providers on the market that do this already. So there's MyZone, which clips to the back of a hard hat. The challenge that you've got with that, and this links back to our kind of behavioural psychology side, is that we want to alert individuals when they definitely are at very high risk, and that is basically they're straying onto a live line. Now, I don't know whether you've ever used one of those exclusion zone pieces of kit, Gareth, on site, but they can often be going off all the time. We have a contact in Network Rail who switched off the alerts on one of these devices, and that meant basically ran to see how long everybody, how many alerts people were receiving, and it was over 1,200 in an hour. And if you imagine you want people to 100% rely.
If you get that buzz, if the tended device goes, if it's buzzing, that needs to be oh shit, get move. Think about absolutely regain situational awareness and get somewhere safe. Yeah, for sure, that makes sense. Yeah.
Otherwise, you get something called alert fatigue, and people then start to ignore the alerts, or worse, they stop wearing the devices because they're alert all the time. However, you've kind of brought on one very interesting point around plant, and You are getting an absolute exclusive here. So my marketing team are probably going to kick me up the backside unless we get the press release out before this.
Before the 4th, yeah, that's it.
Just a few weeks ago, we were awarded a £1.4 million contract with the European Space Agency. Ooh. And that contract is basically to take our existing geofencing system and create the next generation of worksite management. So we've coined it as the digital worksite, and it is to manage these large and complex possessions. So you know where all of your plant is. You're getting real-time alerts. If plant is straying outside of a safe work zone, you've got 3D positioning if a boom is getting too high near overhead line.
Oh, that's very useful. In fact, for a Kirov, so the Kirov in that little circle image there often is used under OLE because they want to do some S&C movements without stripping all the OLE back. And yeah, getting a boom too high can obviously cause calamity in that situation.
And you have lockouts with those at the moment, but the problem is that they're only locked. They're fixed. So what we can do is we can create different zones for different areas. So they might have some OLE taken down in one area, which means they can raise above that. But the only way of using the existing systems is to reprogram them every time you move between different zones. So we can do all this remotely and within seconds. And the whole kind of vision of this system is that right now you're in a position where you need one machine controller per machine.
Yep.
Well, actually, as well as that being quite a challenge for the industry, you talked about contingent labour earlier. Machine controllers are very reliant on contingent labour. We can end up in a position where we can increase the efficiency of machine controllers. So you could potentially have, one machine controller per 2 or 3 machines, and they can be, carrying out their job more effectively. But also, this will mean that there's more efficiency around the whole of the industry.
So there's a huge opportunity in the technology, and working, work. And as you say, the good thing is you work with staff, so you have that relationship. You understand what the staff on site, the various workers on site are, what their challenges are, where the opportunities lie. That's the kind of the key thing. And then the other thing is things like trolleys, the on-track trolley, which just keeping an eye on where this stuff ends up, ensuring that it has been, that it is, if it's within the work site still, and everyone's packed up and in the car, and you've left this thing on track, that's a problem. So again, opportunities for the technology to solve some of these issues. So yeah, really, really powerful. And this picture is an example. You've got a nice little actually, this isn't a work site. This is an engineering supervisor's board. So multiple work sites marked off by this thing. And again, making sure that it's in the right place, really key. These boards sometimes go down on the wrong track. They sometimes go in the wrong place. Making sure, I suppose for this situation, you just have a little marked rectangle that it needs to be within.
Yeah. So just coming in on that, one of the fascinating things about and the big opportunities with this technology is that I think it was the last report was maybe 2015 from the RAIB, and of the serious incidents, which a serious incident is categorised as something that could have led to a fatality. There was, I think, 1/3 of them were down to marker board or stop board irregularities, which was 144. So if you imagine that in 1 year there was a potential issue where there was 144 incidents where there could have been a fatal accident, and it's all because these have been placed in the wrong location. And the reason that happens is because the current process for placing marker boards or stop boards, whatever it may be, is you've got your track diagrams. You might have an individual that has never worked in that location before, and they are looking at track diagram. They're going, right, I need to place this on the SW1, 170 miles on the upline. They might be very confused about exactly where that is, and then they might end up placing it in the wrong location. Now, our device will give the individual an alert when they get to the position that they need to place that board.
Okay, yeah.
That you basically remove the chance of marker board irregularities across the board.
Yeah, very, very powerful. I should say, for the audio-only listeners, I'm going to describe what these devices are. It looks like a how would I describe it? It's like a bit like a walkie-talkie looking device. If I was going to describe it for the listener, it's a bit like a walkie-talkie. It's about the size of your fist, probably about fist size, but not that chunky. It's less chunky than that, and it's got what looks like a very expensive but short stubby aerial that sticks out the top. That's chunkier than you might imagine. Like if it was a walkie-talkie, it'd be a lot slimmer, because this thing has to be so accurate. It has a slightly chunkier aerial, but the whole thing, the size of the whole thing is smaller than a smartphone in terms of height, and it's kind of an inch and a half thick, maybe about that, something like that.
I think probably a little bit less than that, probably about an inch. It's one of the track workers that we were with recently described it as looking like a vape. Now, I don't know what vape looks like.
Oh yeah, it does look a bit like a vape. Yeah, that's true. It looks like a savoury vape, olive tapenade vape with colour to match. Yeah, it's. I suppose also for me at the moment, it kind of looks like a baby monitor. It's relevant for me right now. Kind of looks a bit like a baby monitor, which I suppose for some track workers you could say is. No, I'm joking, of course. Right. Okay. So, so that's the kit. Right. Now it's a chance for you to tell. So this kit arrives. You've talked a little bit, little snapshots of the history, but let's talk about the tended story. So you've got this bit of kit. It's clearly been through a development process. It's clearly got a bit of history behind it. I only came across this and sort of started jumping up. I was in the middle of a recording of doing one of my walkabout recordings for Rail Live, and spotted the geofencing and started doing squeal noises, because I was familiar with it through tier scooters and kind of its physical applications there. But I realised that's genius when I saw that it was used for this. But clearly that was only a year and a half ago, or less than that, a year and a bit ago. It's been around for longer than that. You've hinted that it's 6 years. So August 2017. Tell us what happened in August 2017. Then tell us the story from that point onwards.
Yeah, of course. So we weren't always working on this product. There's been a few kind of iterations and pivots in our business to get us to this position. So we started out in 2017 actually as a consumer brand. So I talked to you briefly about my background in working in non-profit. So I was in Nepal during the 2015 earthquakes, which led me to be facing a whole bunch of different dangers. So we had aftershocks, landslides, and we even got ambushed once, but that's definitely a story for probably a different podcast. And I had a responsibility, a duty of care over a team of volunteers, and the process we had was that we would ring them and just check that they're okay. And then I had exactly the same process back at home with my mum, saying, "Don't worry, I'm still safe today." And I kind of went, this is crazy. There must be a better way to digitalize this. And I said, well, actually, I want to build a technology company to do this. And that all kind of kicked off with this concept of let's build a wearable device. And it looked like a Fitbit at the time. And that would basically detect if you had had an accident, like a fall or a period of no motion, and it would send out for help. This was used by horse riders, sports people, but then we started to be approached by large enterprises like Rolls-Royce and Nestle saying, actually, we love this technology, but we want to see how it would work in our kind of larger organizations. And this led us through an interesting journey. Then the pandemic came in place, and actually, all safety processes were focused on securing against the pandemic. We ended up building a wearable device that then contributed and supported with that. So it's a social distancing wearable that, again, it used positioning technology, but to position how far two people were away from each other, and then alert them if they came within that kind of 2 meter distance to support with social distancing and contact tracing and all of this kind of stuff that was so important at the time. And then after that, Network Rail, or during that, I should say, Network Rail approached us and said, we've got this big problem, track worker loss of situational awareness. We've unfortunately had a few fatalities. We've got this budget. We've got, I think it was initially £70 million, and then it moved to being £250 million. And that was led by Nick Millington, as you spoke about earlier, with the Safety Task Force. And they said, we want to build a safety product and a wearable product that can improve situational awareness. And that's how it all started. We went through a 2-year process of trials, research and development, and then we finally got to the point where we in October 22 we received product approval by Network Rail.
Nice.
And they also created a standard around the technology, and it's escalated and grown since there. I should say, just on those photos, for any of those
yes,
keen-eyed individuals, this was a test track with Story Contracting, who are a close partner of ours and help us test new equipment. So whilst we're not wearing full oranges and PPE, we are still in a safe position.
Yes, don't. Yes, I figured by the attire that everyone was that it was a little bit of test track or training ground. Yeah. And so that so then Megan sent through these pictures of some more recent, the most recent chapter in the story. So tell us about what's going on here. And but for everyone in audio only form, this is a presentation being delivered at an event with some nice kind of nice display showing the kit and showing the fence drawing client and various bits and pieces. What's going on here, Leo?
So one of the really interesting things that we've kind of learned over the period of the last 6 months of deploying our kit, and we're deploying it not only with many of the routes around Network Rail, but also with many of the principal contractors, so people like Siemens, Amco, Giffen, Story, who I spoke about earlier, was that actually there's kind of two parts to this technology. There's one part where the client, i.e. Network Rail or the principal contractor, owns the technology, and then their teams maybe keep ownership of that piece of kit and they'll use it on a daily basis. But then there's another part which is actually they have much more complex work activities. So think about the 80-hour possessions where they're trying to do a mountain of work in a really short space of time on a main line to reduce delays to passengers. And in these situations, they actually want somebody to come in and manage a whole service. So about a month and a half ago, we partnered up with RSS Infrastructure, who I'm sure many of you will know in the industry. They deliver technologies like the ATWS and the SATWAS systems that Gareth spoke about earlier, and also the ZKLs for the remote control TCOD systems. Yeah. So they were a perfect partner for us to actually, and to represent geofencing, because those three technologies I've just talked about are three standards, and then we're the fourth standard within a kind of an umbrella of safety technology standards within Network Rail. So what happens now is they come in and RSS will support on some of these large possessions to ensure that geofencing is delivered effectively and safely, so that teams can focus on the more important matter at hand, which is actually delivering on the work that they've committed to in that very short space of time. So this is just some photos from our recent demo day where we run through a demonstration of what we're doing and how it works, and then we also give everybody an insight into the future of geofencing, which we often like to coin behind the scenes into our clients as we're building the Google Maps but of the rail industry.
Interesting. Okay, so as you say, it's interesting, and it's interesting that the timing of your development fell so kind of aligned so well with this need for a change within Network Rail. As you say, Nick Millington leading the safety task force, essentially trying to eradicate all red zone working. That was the mission, and in order to do that, they needed new offerings to the track teams, to the kind of the maintenance teams, the inspection teams, those who look after the railway, to justify them getting rid of red zone. They needed something. They needed an offering, and this innovation fund, as you say, that increased because it was shown to be providing results, was there. And this is what happens when funds are made available for innovation. The innovation can happen. It's really good to see. So, talking of which, and I'm going to bring us up into kind of open discussion mode in a second, because there's an interesting point that I think. There's a lot of Duff technology and Duff sort of tech out. I say tech rather than technology because if you have a website, I mean, if someone has a website, they can call themselves a tech company, right? Like that's kind of there's a lot of that sort of thing floating around. So I'm interested by the extent to which the railway provides a filter, because it's a safety critical environment. Stuff has to work. You can't do the move fast and break things on a railway, rightly so, because when you break things, you kill people. So I was interested on your thoughts on discussing, does the railway act as a filter for good and bad, or indeed useful and useless technology? To what extent does the railway provide that filter? My perception is yes. In the various technology I've seen, you look at things like the technology that's on the Yellow Fleet. Some of that is world-leading inspection technology. It's impressive stuff. The railway's always been an innovator. There are arguments made that the modern computer actually owes its existence to the railways because of database management and actually the management of rolling stock in the US led to development of computers that kind of you can trace the line through to the technology that we have now. So the innovation is tied to the railways. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this in terms of that filter, of like, okay, you can come up with all sorts of technology, but it has to be real, it has to have an application, it has to work to arrive on the railway. What do you think?
So I think you're 100% right. I think that from our experience anyway, building a technology product for the rail industry has been very challenging, but once you make that initial breakthrough, it's quite a sticky position to be in, because the rail industry naturally has a lot of safety processes that they have to run through, because as you very rightly said, if something goes wrong, it has the potential to not just kill a track worker, but even more seriously, it has the potential to have a significant impact on passengers. And we've seen some very serious incidents, not recently thankfully, but in the past, where you've had train derailments and very serious incidents like that. So I think that one of the interesting points around the kind of filter for the good or bad is that you do have to run through a product approval process within Network Rail before any technology that affects track can be deployed, and that is quite a strenuous process. Always a laughing.
Yeah, and often people are often unhappy about that process. There's a lot of people. There's often complaints about it, and I suppose that process, if you got rid of it, a similar one would surface anyway, because the reality is you kind of have, even if you renamed it and streamlined bits, you kind of have to do most of the things that are in that process anyway to kind of prove that that the process is there to kind of catch, what's the reliability, what's the risk of something going wrong, catch all these different issues. Interference. A key thing with a bit of technology on the railway like this is it going to interfere with signalling technology? Is it going to interfere with this, with that? Anything that's electronic or even electromechanical, you've got to think about EMC and is it going to have any issues with? So that that's important stuff. It's critical.
It was a big learning curve for us, I think. Once you've done it and you've gone through that process, you know that you have a system and a product that is reliable and can be seen as a safety critical system. So it's challenging, but it's worth the. I mean, it only took us 2.5 years to go through.
It's fast. It is fast. Yeah.
Fast. Yeah, I know. We hear horror stories of some companies that taken like 6 or 7 years to go through, and I think that's improving quite a bit at the moment, because we're in a position where there are some consultancies that are now able to offer this product approval process, so we can kind of speed up innovation. And I think Network Rail have taken this initiative because they've realised that it is one of the blockers they have. They only have a limited amount of resources internally, so if they can open it up, they can hopefully drive more innovation in the industry.
That was always the pressure. Is that the process actually isn't the issue? It's just the fact that the staff numbers aren't. It's the same for so many things within Network Rail. They're just resources are stretched so thin that the process takes age. As it pretty much as with everything everyone's experiencing in Britain right now, the log jam of there just aren't enough people doing the processing to whether it's GP appointments or whatever it happens to be. Always a challenge. So streamlining that is helpful. The other, I suppose the last question related to that is this now the fact that you've had to go through this process for the rail industry means that you have what I suppose is considered by others who might find use for the technology quite a respectable position. If you've gone through that process, then the technology is tested. I suppose that puts you in a good position in terms of the comfort you can then approach or be approached by other potential clients, right?
So I think as well as in the UK, once you've got that product approval process, you've got all the principal contractors to go, it's industry standard now. And I always remember back in the days of kind of October, November last year, when we were just trying to break into the market, the first thing that anybody would say is it product approved? Yep. And now that we've got that position, it makes that sale and that convincing that they should use it so much easier. But the really interesting thing, and the thing that I think we can respect the UK rail industry about quite a lot, is that the rest of the world follows the track of Network Rail quite closely. So once the UK has used it and it's got that Network Rail product approval, breaking into other markets is so much easier because they kind of see it as like the industry standard. So we're in the process of deploying in the Netherlands, in Belgium, Ireland, and Canada, and everyone's going, if you've got UK Network Rail approval, then it's going to be pretty easy for us to get it through. So it's almost like it's the catalyst. So once you've got that, then you can expand into so much more following that product approval.
Fantastic. And ultimately, the key thing that we have to remember what it's all about is ultimately it's getting the people out on, technology like this is powerful because it's making people's lives easier and safer. who are out on track. As we said, you cannot eradicate all boots on ballast. You need people to be out there. No matter, the railway will always require people to be out on site, and it's technology like this, innovation like this, that makes their lives easier, absolutely easier, because as we talked about, some of those clever things with marker boards, with technology, with some of the equipment, but also safer. And critically, I think it's going to be interesting to look at some of the overall statistics about. I suspect there'll be measured improvements in kind of reductions in near misses as a result of this technology. I'm keen to see it rolled out as much as as quickly as possible. Really, I look forward to when I go out on a work site and everyone has the little wearable attached to their arms or chests. I'm looking forward to that moment, because I think that it's going to make a major difference in safety. It's fab. Congratulations on a clever bit of kit, Leo.
Thank you very much. It's not just me. We've got a team of 30 people that are building this. So the congratulations really goes out to all of them for all of their hard work in getting us to here.
Nice one. Right. So before we come back to Leo and have a quick last chat, I must press us on with the usual outro plugs. To everyone listening to this in audio-only format, thank you very much. Available on all good podcasting platforms. Believe it or not. Also, if I press the right button here, the usual plugs: patreon.com/GarethDennis to support this happening and more. We're on our chase for 200 Patreon supporters. Please do come and join us. It only costs £1. You just spend £1 a month, and you can be a Patreon supporter and make more of this happen. PayPal.me/GarethDennis for the loose change and abuse if you don't fancy doing a subscription. GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord for the Discord server, the chat. Hello everyone in the chat continuing unabated. And GarethDennis.co.uk/merch for the merchandise. There's merchandise for this podcast. How utterly bizarre. If I go back to our large faces, look, I'm wearing some of it right now. Look, it's the Not a Metro sorter on a hoodie. Why not? Why not? Absolutely bonkers. A shout out to yesterday, because yesterday was the 40th anniversary of the opening of the Selby diversion. There we go. Leo, hopefully you have no idea what I'm talking about. I really hope that is the case. But for anyone who does know what that means, significant date. That was yesterday. So happy birthday, Colton Junction and the rest of the Selby diversion. Next week, it is episode 187. Why is UK infrastructure so slow and costly to build? It's also doubling up as a little bit of a news episode, but we will dig into the infrastructure costs thread that went round kind of when I was abroad, and the FT story associated with it. We will unpick that a little bit. It's going to be the first actually live one in ages, because I've been doing pat leave for so long. So look forward to that, everyone. Oh, now, back to Leo. Leo, thank you so much for joining us for a very interesting, hopefully insightful for everyone watching Rail Natter. That was very interesting. Any last thoughts? Anything that's bouncing around that you felt like you want to add?
You've put me on the spot there. No, I mean, first of all, it's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate the invitation. And I remember meeting you back at Rail Live in 2022, and then a few weeks later seeing the video of our kit up on a YouTube video, which I think was the first bit of external publicity that we got. So shout out to yourself for that. But I think in terms of my last thoughts, it's the rail industry is a dangerous place. I've been trackside and stood next to these trains moving at 125 miles an hour, and most importantly is that everybody just watches out for their safety, not just for themselves but also for their colleagues as well, because you never know what's around the corner, and without everybody looking after each other, there's always that risk.
Absolutely, which is kind of why it's why the technology like this is good, because it's just adding an extra layer. We talk about Swiss cheese theory. A good defense against that is adding extra layers of protection, and this is a good extra layer of protection without necessarily causing, well, in fact, definitely without causing any impact on the ability to do work. So it's not adding it's not adding extra physical stuff. It's not adding extra physical barriers. It's inobtrusive, but adds a really valuable extra bit of safety. Leo, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. It only remains for me and Leo to sort of bid everyone cheerio. Cheerio, everyone. Cheerio. Bye. Oh, it's somewhere behind. Anyway.